just realizing how broken it was. There was
Hmm.
just so much that was just defective about HR and still is. So it's resumes. Let's just start with that. They're stupid. They don't work, and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
There are so many articles out. You can just find infinite articles about how resumes don't work, and yet we still use them. It makes no sense.
The following is a conversation with Katherine McCord. Katherine is neurodiverse and built her career on inclusive innovation in people operations and HR tech. She is also the founder of Titan Management, a company dedicated to helping its clients better take care of people in the workplace to help set up organizations for continuous growth and sustainability. She also lives by the motto that different is not a deficit. Here's her story. Katherine, really appreciate you taking the time today. How's the weather treating you down there in Florida?
It's very nice, thank you. It's a nice, cool 58 degrees, sunny, absolutely lovely.
Yep, would definitely love to be there that time of the year, but aspiring to do that one day. But speaking of aspiring, you've done a lot in the HR space, have built up a really successful company, and really grateful to have you as a guest as I have a lot of really fun stuff to get into. But before I get into all of that, a really hot topic these days is neurodiversity, and you're someone that actually identifies as neurodiverse.
Yeah.
So just to touch upon, can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had kind of growing up with
You
neurodiversity?
know what's funny? I didn't have any. Really. I mean,
Really?
people are always like mesmerized by that fact. Like they're expecting like, oh, my life was so tough. Not at all. My parents had what is unfortunately a unique response to neurodiversity, and they just steered into it. And they were like, "All
Mhm.
right, so this is how your brain works, and that's okay. We're just gonna roll with it, right?" And so the
Mhm.
very first one that they figured out was the obsessive compulsive disorder. I was about 4 years old when they figured that out, and
Mhm.
then later on we figured out the misophonia, which just means that there are certain sounds that actually create a neuro response that basically make me malfunction. So it's not just I don't like the sound; it actually will cause a neuro glitch, so to speak. And then
Mhm.
later on the bipolar, and then way later in life I got the seizure disorder as well. And yeah, so I didn't have any of that. And what's funny is the few times in life that I remember people being odd about it, like
Mhm.
having a strange response to it. I My natural default is that I just assume that they're defective. Right. It wasn't me, so I was perfectly fine. I didn't start having any concerns until um, the depressive cycles with the bipolar kicked in. That was the
Mhm.
first kind of uh, rough patch, and that was interesting. That was um, that when you're that young, you have the hormone shifts anyway, and then you have chemical depression kicking in. That's an adventure,
Mhm.
to say the least. But I was blessed. Um, my parents supported me in not wanting to medicate for anything.
Mhm.
And so I just went on um, and I had a great psychologist help me learn to self-map and to take care of
Mhm.
myself. And once we figured out it was bipolar several years later, even before they were allowed to put the diagnosis on my actual chart, it was just suspected at the time called manic depression, not bipolar. Um, we learned to self-map, and I learned to take care of myself and how to accommodate myself. And that took years of work, but I learned to successfully manage it without medicating. So my journey is kind of different in that way. I didn't have struggle or anything like that. It was just other than, I mean, I guess the depression kind of was, but I feel like
Mhm.
um it wasn't really that bad. And as a kid, like a little kid, nothing.
Mhm.
No
When
idea.
when we're kids, we're all just trying to enjoy life, and really interesting that you were able to get through that without self-medicating. I know it's also a really hot topic these days in the
Yeah.
sense that some medications are needed for certain things, but you also have the argument that you don't want to make people dependent, especially at a younger age. So
Yeah.
very cool how you're able to work around that dynamic.
Yeah.
As a quick follow on there, do you think we're all a little bit neurodiverse?
No. So let me clarify the difference. So everybody has behavioral diversity, right?
Hmm.
And everybody processes thought differently. But what neurodiverse has come to mean, and this was not the original use of the term, but what it's sort of evolved to mean, is a uh, medical difference in how information and stimuli is processed. So it is different. So everybody processes differently. Neurodiversity is a much more visible and sort of elaborate version of that. So,
Mhm.
and it tends to come with both disability and benefit, both, and not everybody has that unique balance. So, I would say according to different estimates and different data that you look at, somewhere between about 25 to 33% of the population is what we
Mhm.
technically call neurodiverse, and then the rest is just everybody being their unique selves.
Got it. Interesting. I did know that, so I'm happy to learn something new every day. So interesting to hear the dynamic around that and kind of how neurodiversity is defined and kind of the demographics in our
Oh,
society.
yeah.
But more specifically in your case, you say that you have six invisible disabilities. Can you just clarify as to what they are?
I sure, yeah. So I have, and actually, my doctor keeps trying to squeak in a few more, and I told her absolutely not. Like we're cutting it off at six. This
Mhm.
is it. You just gotta fit them on in there.
Magic
So
number.
I was like, no, ma'am. So I mentioned three already, which is the misophonia, the obsessive compulsive disorder, and the bipolar. I also have a seizure disorder. There is not really a name for it, but basically my TIAs, which are mini strokes, evolved into seizure activity. And then there's just some other neuro complications with that. So that's one. And then I have, uh, and then I have MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. So basically, my body will create anaphylactic responses to everything, which makes a lot of things dangerous and complicated for
Mhm.
me. It's really weird too because like it doesn't even have to be an actual substance, like a texture can give me a rash. It's very weird. It's a very
Interesting.
bizarre condition. It's kind of my least favorite. Um, and then I have uh, and then I have COPD from COVID.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, COVID, for that. And so my lungs don't work right. And then I have other health conditions as well that I guess legally fall under disability, but medically I wouldn't really be considered disabled
Mhm.
for them. Like I have irregular heartbeat, I have a bladder condition, I have arthritis, I have all kinds of stuff. But medically, eh, I don't know if most doctors wouldn't consider me disabled by those things. It's just
Mhm.
more of a condition, so to
Mhm.
speak. But basically, my body thinks it's like 80 years old is
Got
what it
it.
is. Yeah. I
Interesting.
literally had
Well,
Aflac, an insurance company actually thought they had my age wrong because of all of the things that were wrong. That actually did
that
happen.
too. Well, it seems like you're doing a great job being energetic and fighting through it all. And I'm happy actually that you said which one bothers you the most, because the next thing that I wanted to get into was which one do you think aids you the best? As in, you also say that neurodiversity is your superpower.
It
So
is.
how is that? And which of your kind of which
Yeah.
of those six traits would you say helps you out the
Oh
most?
God, no. Well, the three that are just medical, just I wouldn't, other than teaching me like perseverance and stuff like that, I wouldn't, and adaptability, I wouldn't say are very helpful. But
Mhm.
on the neuro side, so the science behind that is, the body is designed to balance out, and so is the mind. So whenever there's disability, there's also strength. There's a strength somewhere. It's how we're designed as humans. And so for me, I think I have several that I get straight from the neurodiversity that I love, but my favorite one is that from the mania. So this is not me 24/7, but when I'm in a manic cycle, um, I work at superhuman speeds. It's really
Mhm.
crazy. I mean, it really is. Like just the way that I process, the way I'm able to function, is just at a completely different level. And it's accurate and it's creative and it's a whole other way of being. And
Mhm.
it's unbelievable energy and all of that. So that I would say is probably my favorite of all the superpowers that so to speak, that kind of come with the neurodiversity is
Mhm.
I love the mania and I love the benefits that I get when it comes to work and the creative side of my life.
Do you ever get to control when that superpower kind of comes, or you just see that it kind of comes and goes, and whenever it does, you just try to hone it as much as you can?
Oh no, that is strictly hormonal. It's just going to do whatever it's going to do, when
Mhm.
it's going to do it. Now, when I feel it coming, I know to do certain types of work. I know to kind of focus on certain things. I know how to promote it and how to get it to do the things I want it to do instead of destructive things, because it can go either way. So I know how to manipulate it and how to get it to do what I want it to do. But no, that one's selective. Now with the obsessive compulsive disorder, that's always there. And so I can bring that out anytime I want. And that gives me, the strong attention to detail and the ability to really dig and kind of get all the aspects of a project, to come to light and to really research. So I use that a lot with my research and my education aspects. So, and when I have to do something really mundane that I hate doing, I just kind of kick the OCD into gear, and then away we go. So that one I can actually activate as I so choose.
Interesting. So would you say that the other one, the one that comes and goes, is more equivalent to a runner's high, in the sense that if you run all the time, just once in a while, you're going to get that feeling where you feel like you're walking on clouds, something like that?
No. My doctor describes, because we've actually done chemical testing on me before, during, and after,
Mhm.
um, that it is equivalent to snorting about 3 lines of cocaine, but that goes on for days or weeks at a time. So
Interesting. I would not know, but interesting to hear your perspective.
I wouldn't know either. That's what my doctor
Mhm.
told me. She was like, "This is what it would be like chemically inside of your body." And so
Mhm.
basically, or think about it like maybe if you drink, like, 4 liters of soda all at once, but you never drink soda. Like, what would that
Mhm.
do to your body? Like, what elevations would that cause, right? So that's just kind of what it is. It's a very distinct neuro and physical high.
Interesting. But on that note, because I almost imagine, personally, if I'm trying to kind of walk through your shoes, feel how you feel, I'm thinking if I had, I'll stick with the soda example to try to keep it as kosher as possible. But say, for example, if I was drinking a ton of soda or a lot of sugar and I had that intake and I had all that energy, I'd almost kind of equate it in my head to a caffeine rush, in the sense that I'd have all this energy, but I'd feel almost my body moving faster than my mind would
Yes.
want it to move at. So, how have you been able throughout the years to be able to hone that and work, instead of kind of, slowly driving yourself crazy? That's what's
So
really interesting.
it was and that's a good question, because that's what took a lot of work, because mania can go very destructive ways, right? Just like you can if you're hyped up on a bunch of caffeine, right? You can start just doing
Mhm.
some weird and bizarre things, right? Or spending too much, or things like this. And so, um, what I what I choose to do instead is I'll do projects that will feed into that, but it has to be very specific things. So things, first of
Mhm.
all, I have to take turns doing things where I can be physically engaged. So maybe cleaning the
Mhm.
house for a while, maybe, if it's something where I can be physical, and then I can sit and get very creative. And it has to be something where
Interesting.
like, that's when I write, that's when I do my posts, that's when I write my book, that's when I, whatever it is I want to write, that's when I do that. That's when I go create things, because that's something that my mind is just going to spiral into and enjoy. Um, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and actually, that's what there's certain people I'll call up and I'll go, okay, hey, you said you wanted me to collaborate with you on a project. Today is the day. Let's do this.
It
Or
is.
sure, this is
Yeah.
the week. Let's do it this week. So that's, you just have to kind of steer it, and when you feel those other inclinations, like picking up your phone and spending, however much on Amazon or whatever, you have to have things in place,
To
safeguards in
prevent you.
place to stop that, because those kinds of things will happen too. So it's a balance of creating the safeguards ahead of time.
Mhm.
I always tell people, have an accountability buddy, for, and this works for all different mental health diagnoses: anxiety, depression, um, various and sundry other ones as well, but and ADHD, all kinds of things. But um, I have a partner, and then I have certain friends that, when
Mhm.
I'm like that, will also act as my safeguard, and they know to look for certain behaviors, and if they see that, to distract me and to get
Got it.
me going another way. So using that is very important, but then feeding into it, like, okay, the benefit is, I get creative and I get energetic. Great, so let's do something with that. you
Got
know
it. I love how you said that you have safeguards there, because I think, especially when it comes to social media, I think these apps and kind of these platforms are getting better and better day by day at knowing exactly what to have in front of us. So, for example, personally, not that I'm a video editor, but right now, while I haven't outsourced that yet, that's just kind of a function that I have to take on. So, naturally, just have been looking at video editing, stuff like that. And if you open up my Instagram, for example, my whole feed is video editing background, video editing feeds. I mean, stuff that's so catered towards me that it's so hard to click away from it. So I love that you mentioned having those safeguards there to really prevent you from going crazy. And I think, or kind of really focusing on an activity that isn't primarily what you should be doing at the time. So I think that's beautiful and definitely great advice for anyone looking to do that. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting and also brilliant that you do is the sense that when you get into that feeling, when you get into that almost euphoric rush, when, say, for example, your body is moving faster than your mind, you start out with some kind of physical activity to kind of slow the body down a bit, and it almost brings your body and your mind to the same level. And at that point where there's kind of that euphoric connection, that's where you can really move forward. So I definitely think it's beautiful that you're
Oh,
able to do
I love doing that. And I used to hit the gym so hard when I was manic. Now I have COPD and seizures, so it's not really safe anymore. But I
that.
used to love to hit the gym when I was manic to like do that level out, right? It was awesome. And now I do things more like walk the dog, clean the house. I'll exercise, here as I'm able to. I'll go shopping and do some stuff. If it's something I have like, grocery shopping, not like shopping.
Mhm.
But yeah, just you have to kind of level your body out and let your chemicals kind of start to be like, oh, okay, now we know what's going on. All right, let's fix
Got it, for
that.
sure. It's definitely an interesting dynamic and one I hope people will definitely take away a lot of value from. But on another note, a lot of the work that you've done in your career has been in the HR and recruiting space. So before we get into a lot of your career highlights there, did you always know you wanted to work in HR and recruiting, or were there any other industries that ever called your name?
Oh, first of all, I tried everything on purpose. This was very intentional. I did literally everything from financial services and helping people get out of debt to taking care of animals, all the way over to working for the travel partner to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a huge football fan.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I happen to be a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I am happy that they lost last night. So we're having a great conversation, but I feel like I had to shamelessly
It
plug my
was
brother
so
there.
terrible. It was so terrible. But anyway, and
I'm
Boo
sure we'll
Eagles.
see each other again
Uh,
in the playoffs down the line, so we'll have to follow up then.
we'll have to
But
follow up with that. But no, so I tried everything, and but I did have an early introduction to recruiting in HR. So my mother worked in recruiting in HR, and both of my parents. My father is a musician and an educator, and my mother is an HR professional, and
Mhm,
both of them took me around their careers my whole life. So from the time I was itty bitty bitty, I was going to work with them. And I was seeing what the real world was like.
mhm.
And so I would actually play recruiting and HR with my mother. And I would have her like fill out applications and to come work with me. I even fired her once, which I think
Oh
is
boy.
super rude, but like 6-year-old to fire their mother, but I did. And so I kind of had that, but she actually did teach me things as we were doing this. And so I kind of had that early intro. And then as I did a lot of work with startups, I really loved that environment.
Mhm,
So as soon as I found it, I kind of stuck with it, like the startup to growth stage kind of companies. And I just kind of always ended up with the HR type role because I knew a lot about it and I did a lot of research. I knew all the laws and regulations and all this kind of stuff. And then I had the education from my mother, and I just got really good at it. And so I did that as well. And then I ended up working for a startup recruiting agency. And
mhm.
I loved the act of recruiting, but I hated how people were treated. So then I struck out and did it on my own. But yeah, I did everything.
The whole book.
I did all
Interesting.
of it, and it was great. It was a great learning experience.
So would you say that throughout the diversity of roles that you did, whatever role you were doing, you always kind of catered or naturally progressed towards more HR or a people-facing role, and that's really kind of what led you to, do what you wanted to do?
Not always, but towards the end of all of that, yes. Not
Got it.
always. I was always highly successful. The only thing I stunk at out loud was retail. I was horrible. I was not good at retail.
Mhm.
Um,
Any funny retail stories you have there?
there was at one time, it was around Christmas, and I was working for Kohl's, a great
That's
organization,
all.
by
That's
the
all
way.
you had to say, by the way. Christmas calls. We
Christmas and
already know
Kohl's,
where
yeah.
this is going.
I want to highlight that this has nothing to do with Kohl's. They are
Mhm,
wonderful. They were a fantastic employer, but I went, I went into a changing room because what part of my
mhm,
job was collecting all the clothes.
mhm.
And I walked into one, and there was literally a pile up to my hip
Oh
of
boy.
clothes, like the whole thing was just covered. I don't know what these people were doing, and I just went, nope, and turned around and walked. I just, I can't do it. I can't. I'm sorry. I am not a mommy. I am not cleaning up after this ridiculous human. we ended up making a group project out of it because it was so bad and it was just so ridiculous. And other customers were even like, "Oh my God, like what? Who does this?" You know. But I wasn't. Yeah, that was not at all for me. But as I got older and I started um, working in different roles, and I did more and more with startups, I did kind
Mhm.
of gear more and more towards the HR side of things as I went.
Got it. Interesting and awesome to hear about the Cole story there and the fact that your case were able to work that out. Always fun stories working in prior industries. On a personal note, I used to work at Olive Garden. Not to get too
Um,
into it, but I also have a ton of interesting restaurant stories.
oh,
And while
I
I
did
wasn't there for
restaurants too. Yep, I feel you.
yeah, restaurants are certainly, as you could probably attest to this, they're a well-oiled machine, and when one part of the house falls, the whole house
The
falls. So,
whole house falls. Yep.
and we do our best to make sure none of the customers really know what's going on, but that's stories for another day. But ultimately, kind of, you had a variety of roles and ended up really pursuing kind of this HR function and ended up starting time management.
Yeah.
What would you say the motivation was jumping from working within kind of an HR role at a company to kind of pursuing your own venture?
Just realizing how broken it was. There was
Hmm.
just so much that was just defective about HR and still is. So it's resumes. Let's just start with that. They're stupid. They don't work, and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
There are so many articles out. You can just find infinite articles about how resumes don't work, and yet we still use them. It makes no sense. We
Hmm.
have HR tech has not really evolved. Well, let me back that up. Applicant tracking has not really that part of HR tech has not really evolved since the 90s, which is
Hmm.
nuts. Job boards have hardly they've started to we're seeing the starting of some evolution there, but they didn't evolve for about 25, 30 years. It,
Hmm.
it's it's so bad. The way that we interview is ridiculous. I spend so much time talking to clients about how to properly interview, and they're just mind blown. They're just mind blown by the stuff that I tell them, which to me is like the most obvious common sense stuff, but they just have no idea. And part of it is that we don't teach anybody how to do these
Hmm.
things. And so it just keeps the bad habits just keep getting perpetuated over and over again. But that's why I got into it. It's broken. It's
Hmm.
completely broken. So I decided I needed to help fix it. That's the OCD, by the way.
No, I mean, using it as a superpower is great for sure. And, I definitely agree with you in the sense that I think a lot of recruiting, while it's certainly a tough job and, one that's definitely really underrated,
Mm.
there are a lot of things that could be improved upon it, especially considering the relative lack of innovation since the 90s, as you mentioned. But, a quick follow into that, can you describe one thing, from point A to where we are now to point B, how we should be interviewing and kind of how do we close that gap?
In the interview process specifically, sure. So, no, one of the most fascinating concepts to me in interviewing right now is, and I shouldn't say right now, it has been this way for at least the last 100 years. And I
By the
don't,
way, sorry, I have to bump in there. I hope this interview is better than any job interview you've ever had in the past.
oh
So
yeah,
hopefully,
oh yeah, God, I hope so. Uh, it's good. So we've had a lot of over the last 100 years is that there's this idea that candidates need to jump through hoops,
Mhm,
and that's what this is about, and that we need to grill them and like just like dig in there, and we need to not trust them, and it's this whole like kind of maniacal sense that we have about interviewing. It's very negative. It has kind of an attack feel to it. It's very aggressive,
mhm,
and it's very burdensome on the candidates. It really is, and there's not a lot of respect shown. It's like companies will just ghost people. They expect you to move at every chance, but it's not equally flexible on the other side. So it's just very backward. And so what you get is starting from the application process, which is usually cumbersome and you've applied to jobs. It's insane.
yeah.
It's
I used
insane.
to work in corporate America in another lifetime, so I'm aware of all
Yeah,
this,
you
all
you
these
know. Yeah,
shenanigans.
like it take these applications. I once watched somebody apply to work at Walmart. This is about 2.5 years ago. Apply to work at Walmart. It took over an hour to apply to work at Walmart.
Crazy.
What? Like so you start with that. The application is irritating. Then you have, the whole interview process is cumbersome and long and grueling. So instead, and it's not humanistic. It's very, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? What can you do for me?
Mhm,
So instead, what I teach companies to start doing is to make the application process as inclusive and simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and stop with the new trend, and this is so funny to me, and I think that it's companies trying to be inclusive, but it's just backfiring and they're not doing it well, and it's making it hilarious. Is
Mm-hmm.
now they're doing stuff like asking your sexuality, asking what your disability is.
I think it's so dumb. Yeah.
It's not your business. Whoa, nosy much? No, thank you.
Yeah.
So keep the application focused on the
The
job,
job.
A, and keep it simple and short and easy. If you want to gather diversity data, do that anonymously. I'm all for it, but do it anonymously and not tied to the application. So anyway, go through that. When you get to the point of interview, make accommodations standard option. So most of the population, 54% of the population, or over 50%, excuse me, over 50% of the population can benefit from some form of accommodation at some time or another. So whether
Mm-hmm.
it's that you have a migraine that day, whether it's hearing impairment, whatever it is that you have going on. So make accommodations standard options, just build them in, and then start every interview by taking care of the candidate. Tell them everything that they want to know about the team, about the job, about the salary, about the benefits, everything you can think of. And then ask them if they have any questions. Address those questions. And then say, this is my favorite thing in the world to say to people, and it works, and it sets a whole different tone for the whole interview, which is
Mm-hmm.
tell me what's important to you in your next role. What matters to you? And then go from there. And just shift it around, and I teach people to be very to be prepared for different communication styles,
Mm-hmm.
to have different ways to ask questions, and then take that all the way through to the offer stage and all that. So it's a whole new kind of respect factor that needs to be happening, and a whole new mutually beneficial status. And I think it's really about bringing humanity into human resources, which sounds so cliche and stupid, but it's really
It's
true.
sign of the times.
It is, and so that's a big piece of it. I call it human-centric interviewing, and that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is. And just keep putting the focus where it belongs. So keeping it simple, keeping it professional, simplifying everything because we make things way the frick too complicated, and then focusing on the candidate.
That's a brilliant point that you make. And I think that if we think back to, I think we used to have a time when hiring was simple, and then I got more complex with a lot of the rise in professional services. These days, I almost imagine, say, if I was hiring someone for the podcast, I would put like video editor, someone who likes to edit videos, just send me an example of where you like to edit videos. I'm not going to ask them, what their race, religion, gender, like their whole person, like, no, like I'm sure everyone's different. Everyone's got their own vibe going on. I just wonder why firms aren't doing that more these days. Why it has to be such a long process. It's a
No.
mystery to me.
And to your point, they focus on the wrong thing. Like I get,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my favorites that cracks me up is this obsession with years of experience. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
who cares? What possible difference could that make? What if you have somebody who's been doing it for 10 years and they're awful? And they're awful at what they do. That has nothing to do with it. Level of expertise. Like you said, show me how you can do this thing. Can you do it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Focus on solving the problem. Like you didn't say how many years of video editing. Have you ever worked on Facebook? Like no, no.
Show me a video.
Yeah, show me the video. Can you do it? Great. Problem solved. Let's work together. Oh, and can I stand you? Like great. Like let's do this. I think it's really just that simple, and we've been overcomplicating it the whole time. Solve the problem that I have.
Yep, for
Oh, and do
sure.
you
I
have
think all,
integrity? Like that's it. Like those are the two things.
no, definitely for sure. And when I think of doing something like that, it's almost in the case of a lot of times their companies are trying too hard to find the perfect candidate, to find someone who fits everything. And a lot of times there's a lot of people that could fit the bill, but I think half of them, you take so long in the process that maybe there's another company that comes along and has a simple process, and the
Yep.
other half are just might see an application and think I don't want to waste my time with this. So companies could also be losing candidates for not being as simple as they should be, but definitely beautiful in the sense, being able to really articulate in a simple way of what you're kind of looking for. And the other thing that I wanted to add to that as well, and to one of the things that you just said, is that not all years of experience are equal. I think that it's really hard to standardize years of experience across firms, across different, types
Yeah.
of work. someone could have 10 years of experience, but that firm didn't have, a lot of business or had a very kind of mediocre amount of business. And someone could have 2 years of experience, but they've been on fire for the last 2 years. So they've learned to really deal with that. So I definitely think that's a better way, or I don't want to say a better way, but it's a good,
You can just say it. Your way is better. It's okay.
no, that way is better. I think that the way I was trying to articulate is in the sense that it's not good it's a better thing not to have years of experience, but better to have more of a problem solving approach. Because
Yeah.
I think that's more objective. And I think that goes both ways in the sense that the
Yes.
firm can see, what they're exactly getting. And also the candidate can determine if that particular skill set is what they're trying to do. So
Yes. And I think we need to approach recruiting a lot more like dating. I really do. Because then
for
it's
sure.
mutual, right? And you're getting to know each other and you're asking the questions and you're determining if it's a mutual good fit, right? And sometimes it's a great fit for later, but not right now. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's just no to you, like
Hmm.
immediately. Like, yucky, no, thank you. Other times it's, we're just going to be friends. So maybe we have this other way of collaborating, but it's not this.
Yeah.
But I think that there needs to be a lot more get to know you and real conversation as opposed to these scripted questions that we ask people that don't actually tell us squat.
Yeah, for sure. It's outdated, and I hope that over time things get a little more simple, and it'll be interesting to see what the vibe is in professional services, especially considering all the shenanigans that have been going on the last few years. And
Oh yeah.
there have been so many that they could be a whole podcast in itself. But we'll try to keep it concise for the folks here. But on that note, on a similar note, you've been building your own firm now and have had a lot of success, fortunately. What would you say has been the hardest part of running Titan Management?
Two things. Number one, and this is for I think most entrepreneurs, I genuinely hate the sales cycle. It's so irritating. It's just not a thing that's natural for me. There are a lot of people out there that live and breathe for the sales cycle. That's not for me. I prefer to be doing the work, so that part's kind of painful. Um,
Hmm.
but then the other part is it's a tough lesson, and it's an important lesson to learn to balance your integrity and your business.
Hmm.
And what I figured out relatively early on is that you can't you can't be flexible on your integrity at all. It can't be like, oh, this is theirs and this is mine and blah blah. No, no, no. The integrity needs to match. The values and the ethics need to match. This
Hmm.
person may have a different way of working, and that's fine. We can be flexible with that. But the integrity has to be in alignment. And that is one of the earliest lessons and one of the things I've held on to. Because of that, I've had to fire clients, including one time my most lucrative client. I lost
Hmm.
six figures a year
It's crazy.
over firing somebody over an integrity issue. And I'm proud I did it. I have no problem with the fact that I did it. But you talk about a tough business lesson. It's like buy six figures a year, that kind of thing. But it's important to have that kind of alignment. It is.
For sure. On that note, what's been the most rewarding? And I won't prod too deep in here because I don't want to ask for any client sensitive info, but high level, what's been the most rewarding kind of project that you've been able to work on so far?
Oh gosh, so that's easy. There are a few. One has been making accommodation standard within companies, helping them figure out what that looks like because it makes all the employees happier. It raises their productivity. It raises their employee engagement. It ultimately increases customer satisfaction and profits. It's an awesome process, and it's a
Mhm.
really cool thing to watch. It's very easy to implement. Um, another one is another one is teaching people how to properly interview, right? That's always fun to do in those classes.
Mhm.
But another one, and I'll tell you, this has been something I've only started doing in the last year and a half or so. But I've started teaching responding in curiosity, not ego. So I've actually been teaching people at organizations how to break the ego defense that we all have. It's naturally built in,
Mhm.
not a shame or blame kind of thing. How to break that, how to stop it, and then how to respond in curiosity and what that does and how to do it properly. And it's amazing to see the difference that makes, and not just at work, but I've had like managers and executives I've worked with all the way, even staff level people message me and talk about the difference that made in their lives, not just
Mhm.
at work, but like, hey, my husband and I are communicating better. Oh my gosh, my teenager's talking to me again. Like these are things people have actually said to me, and I'm like, great, yay, this is wonderful. So that's been another really wonderful thing that I've gotten to do.
Got it. So you could really see the impact that you're having for
Yeah.
sure. But on that note, you mentioned interviewing. Do you think that when you help people interview better and in a better way for both the candidate and for, your client themselves, do you think that after the interview process, there's more of an intuitive feel about whether someone's going to be a good fit or not, as
Oh yeah.
opposed to the old way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It kind of helps them to realize what actually matters. It's a way of thinking more than anything else. It's, hey, this is what you look at. This is what you focus on. These are the things that don't matter, and kind of helping
Mhm.
their brain hone in on what needs to happen. And so yes, it absolutely does create for better matches. 100%.
You know, Intuition is a beautiful thing. If I ever had a quote on my tombstone, God forbid, hope I live to be many years, but if I ever had a quote on my tombstone, I know this is sounds off topic, but I think you'll really appreciate this. It'll be, our intuition is one of the most knowledgeable sources in the world. I don't know why we spend all of our lives trying to counteract it.
Right? Oh my gosh, I say that all the time. Like the second you get that yucky feeling, listen to it. There is a
Hmm.
reason that is there, you know?
For sure. I think a lot of times, our intuition is a great guide, but for whatever reason, we try to, I think it teaches us the direction, but I think as humans, we try, or at least in recent years, we try too hard to overanalyze what it means instead of just kind of going with it. And, worst case, if it doesn't work out, lesson learned, and then you adjust your intuition to be better next time.
I tell people the only thing I like to make sure of first before I respond to it is this something that's about this or is this something that's about something else? Because you do get
Mhm.
those instincts that are from a past experience that left a strong impression, either good or bad, right? And so the only thing I evaluate in that moment is this response actually about this or is it about something else? If it's about something else, all right, park it, we'll deal with it later. But if it's about this, I listen to it immediately, respond immediately, and then later I'll think about it and figure it out. But
Mhm.
if this is about that, there is a reason. There is a reason for that.
Yep, for sure. Definitely I go with your garden. Beautiful around that. And hopefully companies will be able to adapt to that in the future. But on a slightly different topic, you also have been able to launch something called the Career Launch Podcast. So, pun intended with the double launch there. And on your podcast, you focus on solving some common issues in the workplace. So, just curious, what are some of the issues that you've been able to solve with people?
Oh yeah. So we've worked on a few different. So we've done everything from firing the jerk because some people
Yeah.
get really stuck on keeping these just jerks on their staff. It's
Mhm.
like, why? Why are we doing this? This is idiotic, So how to do that, how to go about it, how to work with somebody who is a jerk when you can't control whether they stay there or not, that kind of thing. We have we've solved some HR tech issues. Oh, and teaching people about payday law. So a lot of people don't know what it is, what it means, how it applies to them. So teaching that, and then busting some myths too. I love to bust myths on the show and talk about like, um, let's see, what are some of the ones? Oh yeah, that women don't negotiate as men. That's complete hooey.
Mhm.
Different things about inclusion, different things about hiring. And so we just kind of go through, we bust myths, we have a ton of fun. And we always laugh. That's a big thing for me. If we're not laughing on the show, we failed. Like it's just,
For
it's
sure.
just not a good show unless we're cracking up about something. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a few of the topics that we've covered. It's been a lot of fun. It's been, oh God, 3 years. 3 years of the show. And I think I'm going into season 5 right now.
Interesting. That's beautiful. Well, congratulations on the
Thank
success and wish you continuing success there. And I'm happy now and laughing a little bit because you've laughed a ton on this show. So I'm hoping that it's been a good vibe.
you.
But quick follow on there. You mentioned the payday law. Personally, I actually don't know what that is. Is there any way you could touch upon
Yeah,
that really
yeah,
quickly?
yeah, sure. So payday law is that wonderful, wonderful piece of legislation that says when you get paid, how you get paid. It kind of governs everything
Hmm.
surrounding pay. It ensures that you do get paid in a timely manner. It ensures that, when you leave a job, how they pay you at the end, all of this. Now, what's crazy is that payday law is not national. It's not. There are states that don't have
Really
it. There are states that
interesting.
have it really great. And there are states that are somewhere in the middle and have some payday law, but it's not the best payday law. It is bonkers to me. It is not a national thing. So one of my big campaigns in life is to make payday law a national concept. But it is important to know your rights. A lot of people assume certain rights. I did. When I was in Texas, we had phenomenal payday law. One of the things Texas is actually really advanced in. And when I came to Florida, I assumed that Florida would have payday law too. Nope, there's
Not the
just
case.
nothing. There's none. there's just nothing. It's like, good luck. Hope you get paid. Hope it all goes well for you. So it's not national. It's something that you need to know what's going on, need to know what your actual protections are, what they actually mean, that type of thing. So I tell everyone, get to know your payday law. It matters more than you think.
Well, one, I appreciate the explanation there. I love learning new things, so think I learned my new thing for the day
There
there.
you
But
go. Now you know what payday
what
law is.
exactly? What's really interesting about that, especially the difference between Texas and Florida, is because typically Texas and Florida, I think, at least politically, have more of a similar approach to how they do business. Yet they have these two different approaches on payday law, which I think is so interesting. Which goes to
So
show that.
the difference between the two is that Texas
Mhm.
has a much stronger sense of workman's
Got it.
protections. Yeah, much stronger
Mhm.
worker protections than Florida does. That's the difference. So corporation, I
Interesting.
see what you're saying politically, that there are definitely some alignment. And when it comes to dealing with corporations, there are some senses, there's some definite senses of alignment. But when
Oh,
it comes to workers' rights and all of that, worlds apart. Texas has done muy bueno. Florida,
not as bueno.
not so great.
Okay, interesting. No, that's really fascinating to hear because I think a lot of times a lot of these places can get siloed out based off, one way a place historically votes. But then
Yeah,
I think, what you just said is a beautiful case study into why, even though Florida and Texas tend to be a little more conservative red states, there's still like more complexities kind of
right.
regarding the potential workers' rights there. So I think that's also a really
It's
interesting point to bring
fascinating,
up. And
right? It is. And
no,
and people get grody about unions, but I'll tell you that in Texas, a big part of why Texas is like that was union work. Now, not all of it. There were other reasons for that as well, but the unions did have a lot to do with building out those laws, so you have to be grateful to them at least for that.
for sure. Super, super fascinating and happy you were able to educate us all there. On another note, I think you'll really appreciate this question, but Catherine, if you could go back and tell your 10-year-old self something, what would you tell her and why?
Oh gosh. I don't um you know what? I think that I would tell myself the same thing I teach people every day now because I wish I would have learned it way sooner, which is to make sure that I'm responding in curiosity, not ego. And making, yes, in
I
other
love
words,
that.
focus on learning from others more than educating them about things. So I think
Mhm.
that would be the piece of advice I would give. Yeah.
I love the way you say that curiosity, not ego, and let the intuition do its thing, and you'll be happy where it leads. So beautiful note on that. I know you mentioned earlier that neurodiversity is kind of your superpower, but if you could have any of the fictional superpowers we imagined, say, for example, flying or being invisible or one of the other million things that we saw when we were kids, which one would it be and why?
So if I was going to be a superhero, period, I would be Phoenix from
Mhm.
X-Men.
For
And
sure.
but I would have telekinesis. Like, and I just mean like all encompassing. Like I can throw trees at you, I can throw like make the wind swirl around. I mean anything surrounding telekinesis. That would
Mhm.
be it.
Got it. It's a cool response and it definitely a unique one as well, but really really interesting there. Is there a favorite book that you've read recently that you'd recommend for people?
Oh gosh. Um, you know what? I've read quite a few in the past. I've actually been on a book hiatus. Now realize that like right when you asked that, I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't read anything in a while. The last thing I read was Dracula, and I don't think I recommend that for everybody. I loved it, but I don't necessarily recommend it for everybody. Um, no, really, no. There's not like a book. I mean, just but what I do tell people is constantly learn. Just do
Mhm.
that. Just constantly learn. Whatever you're into, don't just read the fiction. The fiction stuff is tons of fun, but read the smart people stuff too, and make sure you're constantly.
Be able to, pun intended, be able to balance the science and the fiction, and I
Yes,
think that'll
exactly. Yes.
take you to where you're supposed to. But really interesting on there. You've done a lot in the HR space, but is there a dream dinner guest that you'd love to get dinner with, whether it's someone who an HR legend or kind of anyone else in history? Is there anyone else you'd love to eat with?
Okay, so this is kind of random, but there is a brilliant spoken word artist who also was very famous for being in a punk band called Black Flag, whose name is Henry Rollins. He had a great show on History Channel too. Fascinating freaking human. This dude has met like all these fascinating people. He's been all around the world randomly because he felt like it, took the Trans-Siberian Express. Like, who does that? And just, he's a fascinating, fascinating human. He's good friends with RuPaul, really cool. And he is the person I've always wanted to sit down and have a conversation with because I love how he dissects information and how he processes things and the way that he thinks. And I think it would be the greatest conversation of my life. I'm infuriated because my husband got to meet him one time and I didn't get to go with him and participate. And then either that or Queen Elizabeth. You know what? She was a true female rock star. I mean, she was amazing. She was a world leader from the standpoint of, she was the leader of a powerhouse. She accomplished all kinds of amazing things. And I think being a woman in what was very truly a man's world. I mean, we say that now
Mhm.
about things, but that was a real man's world back,
Yep.
hundreds of years ago. So I would also love to have sat down with her and had a nice chat.
I'm sure that would have been a nice chat too, over some tea and some
Yes.
really great food. But awesome to hear that, and always great to ask that question because you really get to see how people think and
Right.
what people in history they look up to. So really beautiful that you would look up to Queen Elizabeth and especially everything that she's accomplished. On a similar note, Catherine, what would you say brings you the most happiness in life?
Oh, two things. Doing the work I do with neurodiversity, I get to speak to a lot of people, and you have a real chance to impact people's actual lives. What
Hmm.
goes on with them, how they feel about things, um, and connect with them on a very deep level. And I enjoy that immensely, and having that opportunity to teach about something that's so personal, not just for me, but for people across the world and making a real difference in that space. And then the other one is my animal rescue work. I've been doing that
Hmm.
for many, many years. We have had almost 70 fosters and counting. I've worked with different rescue organizations, and that brings me infinite joy.
That's awesome. Happy that there's stuff that brings you happiness. And Catherine, you've accomplished a ton in your career, and I'm sure you'll continue to accomplish and do a lot of really cool and innovative stuff in the HR space that I hope a lot of companies will listen to this show and be able to
Hope
take away a
so.
lot from. But at the end of your life, on top of everything, what do you want to be remembered for?
Innovation. It's very simple. Innovation and making the world a more inclusive place. That's it.
I think it's a beautiful way to be remembered, and wish you only the best with that. And Catherine, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm happy that you got to laugh a lot, and really appreciate taking the time to go on the show.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Catherine McCord. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.